in listening to those quotes about interracial marriage, I recalled that Brigham Young's idea about relations between the sexes was death on the spot. And I also wanted to note that the California Supreme Court, in reaching this decision, did rely heavily on a California case, I believe it was Perez, which had declared that a ban on interracial marriage violated the California Constitution. And this was, I think, maybe a couple decades before, or at least a decade before Loving versus Virginia. I had just a couple comments I wanted to make also about Kaimi's comments. Regarding tax-exempt status, one difference between the Bob Jones University case and the church's situation is that Bob Jones is a university, not a religion. It's a religious university, but it's still a university, and I believe its tax exemption falls under some different rules than does a church. And until churches are required, such churches, the Catholic Church and the Mormon Church, are required to ordain women, I wouldn't worry about them losing their tax-exempt status over their refusal to recognize gay marriage. So I think that's pretty much a red herring for the foreseeable future, for your lifetime and mine. Now, as for my prepared remarks, I can't resist beginning with an "I told you so." Back in 1996, I was on a panel at Sunstone called Patriarchs and Politics, from the ERA to the Proclamation on the Family. And my task in that panel, in part, was to talk about the Proclamation on the Family, which had just been issued the prior September. So it was new. And in doing so, I said that as far as I could tell, the way people were hearing the Proclamation on the Family, people in my ward, people I knew, they heard it as this warm, fuzzy document that affirmed these strong, loving families that we all want to have. But I said that there was an underlying subtext in the Proclamation on a topic that is never mentioned in the Proclamation, and that's homosexuality. I said that certain aspects of the Proclamation, this is a quote, are a clear statement that church leaders intend to resist any further societal legitimization of homosexual relationships. And I noted the political language at the end of the Proclamation, and then I talked a little about some of the reasons that I thought they issued the Proclamation when they did. And in particular, at that time, they had tried to intervene in a case in Hawaii. By intervention, that's more than filing a friend of the court brief. It's saying to the court, our interests are so affected by this litigation that we should be a party to this litigation. And the Supreme Court in Hawaii disagreed with them. But the church did try very hard to be a party in that litigation. And not long after that, they started asking people in California to write legislators about a measure that was pending there about homosexuality, and also in Hawaii. So later, after I did this, in a missive to my stake president, the church, some anonymous person in the church some anonymous member of the church structure in a directive to my stake president, took exception to my suggestion that this was a political document to fight homosexuality. But in the more than 12 years now, since the proclamation came into existence, I am unaware of any time or circumstance under which the church has urged members or government leaders to enact a single measure to strengthen the family other than legislation that would undermine homosexual relationships. So I feel vindicated. The language in the proclamation says, "We call upon responsible citizens and officers of government everywhere to promote those measures designed to maintain and strengthen the family as the fundamental unit of society." Now, I want to go back and talk a little bit about some history about the church's involvement in politics, and I'm going to go back to the time of the Equal Rights Amendment. and then talk about the Knight Initiative, which was California's previous gay marriage issue. So back at the time when the church was fighting ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, the church, it ratified in California ratified it very early, so I didn't really personally see any of this happening. But in Virginia, where where the legislature looked like it might ratify, the church held meetings and they told people to write letters, and they bussed women to the legislature, and they raised money. They actually raised money in California and funneled it to Virginia to fight the ERA there. And I know that because I was supplied with fundraising forms from the state of Virginia, and I found a stake directory in California and was able to identify that almost all of the donors were Mormons. But when they told people to lobby, to write letters, they always told them, you're not acting on behalf of the church, you're just acting as individual private citizens. Don't say that you're members of the church. At the time, it was obvious to those of us who saw what was happening that the Special Affairs Committee of the church was orchestrating this. And President Hinckley, he was not president of the church then, but he was head of the Special Affairs Committee, and I saw him go on television and say that the church doesn't get involved in politics, and it's just our church members acting as individuals. And at the time, he was running the anti-ERA campaign. Now fast forward to the Knight Initiative in 2000. This is the law that the California Supreme Court just overturned, correct, Amy? Yeah. And by this time, I had moved away from California, but I still had a lot of moles there. And I learned that church leaders in Salt Lake had sent out directions telling local leaders that they should raise money and work for passage of the Knight Initiative, but I didn't have any access to the document. And church members were being told, I knew that they were being told that they needed to support this legislation in order to follow the prophet. And in fact, my son's stake president went so far as to tell him that President Hinckley had had a revelation that the church should fight gay marriage and that members should support that. And then one weekend, I was contacted by Jenny Brundine, who is a reporter at KUER, which is Salt Lake's National Public Radio affiliate. And she was working on a story, and she'd been talking to church PR people and to some others at church headquarters. And they were consistently telling her that Salt Lake was not involved in supporting the Knight Initiative. And she called me up and she said, could it be that these people in California are just acting on their own? She had a specific person who she was referring to. And I said, listen, when it comes to this issue, he can't wipe his nose without permission. But I still couldn't prove it. Well, eventually, over this weekend, she found the document. Someone gave it to her, and she told me he was very fearful. He didn't want to be known as the person who leaked it, but he had given it to her. So I said, okay, here's what you do. You talk to brother so-and-so. This is what I do when I cross-examine a cop on the stand. First of all, I marry him to his report. I make him say that he knows how important it is to write a report, and he knows it's important to be accurate, and he knows it's important for it to be complete. And after I get him thoroughly committed to that report, then I start asking him questions that show how inaccurate and incomplete the report is. So what you need to do is you need to marry brother so-and-so to his position that the church is not orchestrating this campaign in California, and then tell him you've got the paper. So she called me back a few hours later, and she said, I did what you said. And after I told brother so-and-so that I had the paper, he got very quiet, and then he said, I need to go and I'll call you back. So I said, all right, there are three things he can do, that the church can do. They can continue to lie in the face of the evidence, or they can come clean, or they can hang brother so-and-so out to dry and say that he was just acting on his own. Well, they did come clean, and they admitted that they were involved. And the next morning, I listened to her report, and I don't think she was the one saying the words, but they told that the church leaders had first denied and then had admitted their involvement. And now, about this same time, the church itself, rather than raising money from its members, from church funds, they made a contribution of $500,000 to an anti-gay rights or gay marriage, I think, campaign in the state of Alaska. Now, fast forward to February 2008. Peter Danzig, you may have read about him in the paper. He was a former member of the orchestra at Temple Square, and he resigned his membership rather than be excommunicated over a letter to the editor that he had written opposing the church's opposition to gay marriage. After he left the church, then the church posted their sort of defense of their actions on their website. And this is what they said. In his Tribune letter to the editor, Mr. Danzig said that he was, quote, troubled that my church requested I violate my own conscience to write in support of an amendment I feel is contrary to the Constitution and the gospel of Christ. End of his quote, but continuing the quote on the church website, and this is the important part. In reality, church leaders had asked members to write their senators with their personal views regarding the federal amendment opposing same-gender marriage and did not request support or opposition to the amendment. And now, 4 months later, fast forward to late June, and by this time, the Mormon blogosphere is alive with the announcement that the church is going to read this letter in California, and in sacrament meeting. And I got the text of the letter several days before it was going to be read. And I talked to somebody yesterday who told me his bishop didn't get it until the night before it was supposed to be read. So I had it before he did, before at least one bishop did. And then the Salt Lake Tribune ran a story on it, and the church then posted it on the internet. Now, the June letter drops all pretense of asking members to act according to their own conscience. This is what it says. We ask that you do all you can to support the proposed constitutional amendment by donating of your means and time to assure that marriage in California is legally defined as being between a man and a woman. Our best efforts are required to preserve the sacred institution of marriage. So in other words, between February, when they said that Danzig was just asked to express his views, and June, when they told California Mormons what they were supposed to do, the church reversed its approach, now exalting institutional imperative over individual conscience, and possibly raising the stakes for Mormons of conscience who support same-sex marriage. The idea that the church, well, the church is still kind of doing some of the same things in terms of having people say that they're just acting on their own behalf. And this is something that was recently posted on the internet. And this is a man who is telling about what happened in priesthood meeting. My second complaint, his first complaint was that politics is dirty and the church really would be better off not getting involved in it. But he said, my second complaint is that the church needs to admit that members acting pursuant to its promptings are acting on its behalf. The instructions we received in priesthood was that when canvassing the neighborhood, we were not to go in twos, wear white shirts and ties, or do anything that would make us look like Mormons. Instead, we were to make it clear that we were acting on our own as individual concerned citizens and not on behalf of the church. I think that's a bit deceptive. If the church is going to strongly urge its members to support the proposition, then it needs to take responsibility for the things those members may do. So that's what he wrote. So why the secrecy? Well, I can't read the minds of church leaders, but since they don't tell us why, I'm going to speculate. Possibly they don't want to appear to be too involved because they fear having their tax-exempt status challenged. And I mostly, this would be a different reason for losing their tax-exempt status than not recognizing gay marriage. This would be losing their tax-exempt status for being too political. I did some research on this back at the time of the Night Initiative, and what I found was that it's an ambiguous point. But unless an organization, a tax-exempt organization, uses a substantial amount of its resources to lobby on political issues, then they're safe. Well, so if you're a poor organization, you don't have very much money, you can't spend very much. But if you're a rich organization, you can really spend quite a lot without getting into trouble. So I don't think that's going to be a problem for them. But it might be one concern. And maybe it's fear that they will alienate prospective members, or maybe it's just a habit in a church where the hierarchy makes the decisions and the members follow. One question raised by this directive is what's going to happen to members who choose to conscientiously oppose the church's position. Will they be socially or ecclesiastically marginalized? Will they lose their temple recommends? Will they, as happened to my son during the night initiative, be put on super secret double probation, or disfellowshipped or excommunicated or encouraged to resign, as Peter Danzig did? There's an email circulating around the internet that purports to be a conversation that someone had with Apostle Jeffrey R. Holland. And he told this person, reportedly, that no one would be disciplined or lose their temple recommend over opposition to the church's position over this issue. But I have heard anecdotally of one person who has been asked to surrender his or her temple recommend. The issue is personal for me. I no longer live in California, but I have children who do. And very soon my daughter's involvement in setting up a pro-gay marriage website is going to become quite public. The website, in case you would like to look at it, is mormonsformarriage.com, and it respectfully and rationally makes the case for why Mormons should support same-sex marriage, and I'm very proud of her contribution to it. In the coming months, we're going to see tens of millions of dollars raised and spent in California over one word, because really this decision focuses on one word, marriage. As Kaimi said, the substantive rights are going to pretty much stay the same either way. The majority and dissenting justices agreed that California already protects the substantive rights of same-sex partners. So anyone who doubts the power of words need only look to California and to all the money that's going to be spent over the word marriage. So now let me ask a question of how that money might be better spent to, as the proclamation on the family says, promote measures designed to maintain and strengthen the family as the fundamental unit of society. What if the money supported a measure to enact a system of premarital counseling to help people make informed decisions as they enter marriage, and of low-cost postmarital counseling to help couples in crisis resolve disputes and strengthen their marital commitments? What if it supported a measure to provide universal health care so that families will never be devastated by the leading cause of bankruptcy in America, high medical expenses? What if it supported a measure to allow paid maternity leave so that women who work could afford to stay home for a while with new babies to help them get off to a good start in life? What if it supported a measure to provide daycare to families, or job sharing, or part-time work with full-time benefits so that parents could spend more time with their children? What if it supported measures to help people whose good jobs have gone overseas and who need retraining for comparable jobs in the new economy? What if it supported measures to provide better prenatal care and a cleaner environment to help children be healthier? What if it supported conservation measures and alternative energy to mitigate the horrible impact that the high cost of energy is imposing and will impose this winter on struggling families? I'm not saying that all these suggestions are necessarily doable or that they're necessarily good public policies, but are not the underlying problems they address moral issues? And would not addressing them have a much greater potential to maintain and strengthen families as the fundamental unit of society than whether or not gay people call their unions marriage?